according to the Center for Security Policy, the red-green axis joins together the forces of the Marxist left, the red, with the global Islamic movement, the green. What otherwise might seem an odd pairing is an ad hoc collaboration among global forces whose common objective is the destruction of Western civilization. America's constitutional republic stands alone as the last fortress against tyrannical forces of both red and green, whose collective goal is to alter and undermine our national character, our traditions, and laws so much that it can overthrow our form of government without firing a shot. The alliance allows each to take advantage of the tactics, strategies, and cultural features of the other, and mobilizes a vastly larger number of people. For example, the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE, now supports Black Lives Matter, BLM, and participates in its protests. The American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, and the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, also work with BLM, CARE, and other open borders groups. Immigration is one of the red-green axis most effective tools. Under the banner of compassion, it advocates for open borders and endless waves of refugees, asylum seekers, and other third world immigrants to stress government budgets at all levels, overburden communities with medical, language, crime, welfare, and other burdens, while rhetorically and sometimes physically attacking those who object, calling opponents racist, bigots, xenophobes, and the latest popularized smear, Islamophobes. What's missing from this agenda is not only the prioritization of immigration by those who not only intend sincerely to assimilate into American society, but have the background, education, and skill sets to do so successfully. This is not an accident. It is by design that America's foundational principles that once made it the new shining city on a hill are disdained and discarded as so much useless ideas. Some Americans do have a grasp of both the enemy and societal forces at play. The red-green open border globalists intend that the first things principles of our founding fathers be subsumed by a tsunami of Muslim fundamentalists, third world revolutionaries, and unskilled welfare seekers who have no intention to assimilate. My guest today, author James Simpson, in his latest book, Red-Green Axis 2.0, dives deeply into the immigration refugee resettlement issue and catalogs not only the breadth and depth of the program and its supporters, but exposes the massive problems and cultural changes in America's society that have been imposed deliberately by the Axis to completely eliminate America as we know it. Well, 2nd Congressional District of Maryland candidate Jim Simpson, and author of his latest book is the Red-Green Axis 2.0, is my guest today. Jim, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Rob, hey, thanks a lot for having me. Great to be with you.
Yeah, it's good to have you on with us. I love the fact that you've done these books about this issue called the Red-Green Axis. Just real quick, explain to the audience what that is. And thanks for holding your book up.
Sure. Well, the Red-Green Axis is a collaboration between the left, which is the communists, the socialists, the radical left in this country, the Democrat, most of the Democrat Party, and the Muslim organizations most prominently represented in the United States, and for that matter, throughout the world, is the Muslim Brotherhood. And then, of course, there's some offshoots from that as well. But they collaborate together, and especially in the United States, the Muslims collaborate with the left because from their point of view, the left owns the commanding heights of the culture. And so by partnering with them, by allying with them, now the Muslims have enjoy that same commanding heights. And they're promoted, as you know, in Hollywood, in the media, in our educational institutions, and increasingly in politics. And so it's very, very mutually beneficial to them. And in fact, if you will, let me read a quote for you from Osama bin Laden in 2003 on an Al Jazeera broadcast, one of his recorded videos. He said, "He who fights to raise the word of God will fight for God's sake. Under these circumstances, there will be no harm if the interests of Muslims converge with the interests of the socialists in the fight against the Crusaders, despite our belief in the infidelity of socialists." To me, that is a perfect definition of the Islamist attitude towards the West, towards America. The enemy, the enemy of my enemy is my friend type of thing. But I think it actually goes further than that. The left sees the Islamic groups as a perfect wedge, using the First Amendment to get these radical groups protected by the First Amendment to essentially attack from a religious angle our constitutional underpinnings, while the left attacks it from every other direction.
Yeah, when you say Islamist groups, you and I know what that means.
Yeah.
We've been fighting Islamist, I call them Islamo-Nazis,
Mhm.
Islamist,
Yeah.
modest, strong ultimate, ultra fundamentalist Muslims.
Right.
Long time.
Right.
Of us have, and our country has too. But when you say Islamist, you're not talking about the religion, are you? You're talking more about the ideology and the government that comes along with an Islamic theocracy.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, it's very interesting. Excuse me. I wrote a article for the Center for Security Policy the summer before last, or oh no, it was last year rather. Sorry. And it's about the Council on American Islamic Relations annual Islamophobia report. And, they have this list of things you can't say, because if you say them, you're an Islamophobe. You can't use the term Islamic terrorist. You can't use the word Islamic jihad or jihadis. You can't use the word Sharia. Any of the words that we associate with these Islamist groups are verboten. You can't do it. You're an Islamophobe. Just like if you say anything bad about transgenderism, then you must be a homophobe. I mean, they're simply applying the left's smear tactics against us using this newly created term. But it's really funny because while they use those terms against us, at the same time, they acknowledge that those terms are correct. For example, there is a Dr. Mohammed Khalifa, who is a professor at Indiana University. He wrote a pamphlet for teachers called Islamophobia and Christian Privilege, What Educators Must Know. And he says here, recognize that Islamophobia is one of the most widespread, rapidly growing, and tolerated types of oppression in schools and society today. That's absolutely untrue. But anyway, he says, the goal for teachers to wipe out this Islamophobia is to identify discourses and practices of Christian privilege and white privilege, and For example, such as talking about Islam as more than just a religion. You can't talk about Islam as a institution, as a political organization. If you do so, you are an Islamophobe. But on the very next page, the very next page, he said, oh, here it is. Recognize that Islamophobia can be connected to Muslims or Islam beliefs as incompatible with non-Muslim beliefs or secular practices. Saying that is Islamophobic. But on the very next page, he says, recognize that Islam is not a religion in the sense that Western Europeans separate faith from other aspects of life. So he's just defining what we have already observed as this aspect of Islam that is all encompassing. You know, it is not a religion. It is, as they say, a way of life, and that includes Sharia law. That includes abiding by Islamic law as opposed to American law. Now, your average everyday Muslim is happy, I believe, to abide by American law and live here and enjoy the privileges of being here, enjoy the affluence, enjoy the freedom. But when the imams come along, they've got to zip it, and the imams will insist that Islamic law trumps American law. And that's where the left sees such an advantage, because, you know, when you get into a situation where you have two separate definitions of what is legal in the United States, you are by definition destroying the underpinnings of the Constitution, which is the basis of our entire society.
Yeah, that gets me to my second question I had for you, and the reason I wanted to do this interview now. The timing of it is,
Yeah.
the Chinese Communist Party really inflicted the current pandemic with the coronavirus, COVID-19, on the entire planet.
Yep.
They have a massive disinformation campaign with the media on the left. And I'm just wondering if you've made any observations on them tying with the green side, the CARE, Muslim Brotherhood, those kind of folks in their disinformation campaign.
Well, CARE, you know, has gone to great lengths to characterize itself as the biggest Muslim civil rights organization in the country. Now, we know that CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, is the American front group for the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas. That's what it is, and it's been defined as such in court documents. It's beyond dispute, but they want everybody to think that, oh no, this is just a civil rights organization protecting the rights of Muslims and Americans. So they're doing all of these COVID-19 webinars and, you know, broadcasts where they're talking about what you can do, what you shouldn't do, and all that. They're, you know, it's kind of like, it reminds me a lot of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. You know, they put themselves out as a social welfare organization.
Right.
And because, you know, they provide welfare, they provide all kinds of things. They insinuate themselves into the society and justify it on the basis of these quote unquote good works, while basically at the same time holding the entire population hostage to what they're doing, and at the same time engaging in war and to acts of terrorism. And, you know, CARE does not directly get involved in acts of terrorism in the United States, but CARE is the first one to come out anytime there's an Islamic terrorist operation in the United States, and they stumble and run to defend these people and claim that, oh, they're just misguided. They're not Islamic at all. You know, but they're all always out there right at the front defending these people. And, you know, when a lot of Minnesota, primarily Minnesota Somalis, were being recruited by Al-Shabaab and ISIS a few years back, CARE was actually was protested by Somali Muslims in Minnesota, who accused it of helping ISIS to recruit their children. And one guy even testified to that before the US Congress. And he was smeared in the next Islamophobia report as, guess what? An Islamophobe.
Surprise.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Evidence of them working with the Chinese Communist propaganda effort?
No, I have not seen that. Of course, we see it in the media a lot. I mean, it's all over the media.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even to the point where the media is trying to discredit the idea of using the malaria drug. That's really stunning. I mean, that's life-threatening, really.
Yeah, is CARE taking a position on that?
Not that I've seen. Not that I've seen. I think they may be laying low on that one, because, as I say, they're really trying to, and while publicly they're really trying to present themselves as this social welfare organization, this civil rights organization, behind the scenes they are ramping up their attacks on people like you and me, who buttonhole them for what they are. I mean, there are a lot of things going on. I can't really talk about them, but there are a lot of things. They're doing very nasty things, and they've always done nasty things. If you remember the Minnesota imams that showed up at the airport and then started doing all kinds of very questionable stuff, and then the airline, they threw them off the airplane because they thought they were, preparing to engage in active terrorism. And of course, CARE came out and sued the airline and forced them to, dial back their accusations. But that was probably a CARE setup from the beginning, because that's the kind of thing they do. They create a situation where somebody is going to react in a way that's hostile, and then they turn around and sue that person in court. And usually, very often, they lose because the truth comes out. And they're willing to settle before the truth becomes public, because they don't want people to know that that's their real game.
Yeah, the second reason I wanted to bring you on, Jim, to talk about this is what you highlight in 2.0, and that is the immigration refugee.
Yeah.
That is should be very concerning to all Americans. Even today, the folks that are coming across the border aren't just from Mexico or the Central American countries and those kind of things. Yep. I mean, we're stopping Chinese nationals.
Yep, a lot. Yeah, a lot.
Nations are all assisting and facilitating that travel, right?
Yeah, and the most shocking, amazing thing was even after Trump's COVID travel ban, the State Department kept bringing in refugees like nothing had changed. And they kept on doing that until the United Nations suspended the program, because the UN was actually worried, or at least that was their reasoning, that they would spread the virus. And but the State Department was totally unconcerned, and the State Department continues to import refugees under different programs. For example, the Special Immigrant Visa Program, which takes people from Iraq and Afghanistan who claim to have helped us in the wars there, and claim to, have to flee their country because if they hang around and they get exposed, they'll be killed. And in some cases, that's true. But in a lot of cases, there's a lot of fraud there. But either way, they're just bringing those people in by the thousands. And it is not clear either. In fact, it is clear. They're not testing people unless the people that they're bringing in are actually symptomatic.
Correct.
And that is, the State Department is fully invested in the open borders agenda. and the State Department, all of the agencies that work to facilitate refugee resettlement. They are all totally on board with the open borders agenda, bringing in illegals, getting them amnesty, finding ways to define illegals as legal. You know, the DACA program, that's what that was. And they're very heavily invested in it. And the private contractors that actually do the resettlement work, it's like a revolving door between the State Department, the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Refugee Resettlement, and those agencies. They work for the State Department for a while, then they go back and work for the tax-exempt organization that's doing the refugee resettlement, then they go back to the State Department, and it's just a constant cycle. And it's all just incestuous stew of radical leftists totally invested in open borders.
How do you present that information to the average American? You know, average Americans really don't mind helping folks that are in trouble, like refugees.
Yeah.
And you know, most of them believe in the temporary worker programs, like for farmers and those kinds of things, and don't worry too much about that.
Yeah.
How do you present this to them to be able to communicate the sincerity of the threat from a national security perspective? I think the pandemic's going to help us do that, but what's your approach to that?
Well, the thing is, you know, many communities have been just swamped with the problems these continuing stream of refugees bring. You know, in my book, I have my favorite chart is a table that lists the number of languages spoken in public schools in various school districts around the country. And it's anywhere from 25 to 120 different languages spoken in different public school systems, excuse me, for up to 40% of the student body. Now, the people who are doing the refugee resettlement work, and a lot of the resettlement contractors get church groups to do it, and the church groups do all this stuff for free and allows the contractors to save the money that they're getting from the federal government to do this. So the contractors, if you look at their spreadsheets, they have huge reserves of net assets. You know, they could run without getting a single appropriation for years upon years. But the church groups think that they're doing, you know, Christian work. They're not allowed to proselytize, though. All they can do is help these people resettle refugees, but they're not the ones who are facing the consequences. The church groups are working with the refugee contractors. They're putting these people in the, you know, in an apartment complex or something, but they're not the ones who have to deal with the results day to day. You know, there's a apartment complex in Manchester, New Hampshire, was shut down due to a bed bugs infestation that was never there before they began resettling tons of Somalis. What's another? There's so many examples. In New Hampshire, the wait for public housing for Americans is over 8 years.
Goodness.
But if you're a refugee, you get in and you get your apartment the first day, paid by the taxpayer.
Yeah, I think those are the kinds of issues that we need to make sure that American citizens are.
Yeah. Well,
I think this pandemic is helping with that type of messaging, which is truth.
Yes.
And you know, I mean, the assistance that's going out should be going to American citizens.
Yeah.
And folks that that are here legally,
right,
and not to anybody here illegally, yeah, or to and nobody should be able to get in line in front of an American citizen like what you, right? But, they are a refugee.
Yeah,
it's just it's unacceptable. We're here to serve the American people first. Yeah. And that's why I believe in America First policies, and I'm very pleased to see a lot of it being enacted. I'd like to see more.
Yeah.
But Jim, I mentioned you're running for Congress in Maryland, second district.
Yes, sir.
Give us 30 seconds of your campaign pitch and tell people how they can help you.
Okay. Well, Maryland is California East. That's what Maryland has become. The Democrats pretty much own Maryland, and as every place they own, they're just destroying it. And it's a beautiful state. I raised my children here. I intend to spend the rest of my life here. And people are actually leaving the state because taxes are getting so high that they can't take it. Baltimore City itself had a population below 600,000 for the first time in a century this year. And people keep bleeding out of the state because they can't take the regulation, they can't take the taxation, and they can't take the increasingly extremist policies that the state legislature and the members of Congress and Senate inflict on them. And as you say, people are waking up. They're seeing, and this COVID crisis, in fact, I write on my campaign blog, JimSimpsonForCongress.com, I write, in every cloud, there's a silver lining. And this is the silver lining in this cloud. It's opening people's eyes to see just how bad things have become and why and where we can place the blame. And I believe that there's going to be a revolution this year, and I'm going to be the next congressman for the 2nd District in Maryland. And I urge your listeners and viewers to support me. Go to JimSimpsonForCongress.com. Please hit that red donate button like it's the last thing you're ever going to do. And you will get a very strong, committed conservative in Congress, and hopefully we can turn the House over and give it back to the Republicans so we can get to work again.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Jim. I know you're a busy guy. And ladies and gentlemen, that's our guest this time, Jim Simpson, congressional candidate in the 2nd District in Maryland and author of his latest book is Red Green Axis 2.0. Until next time, this is the Rob Maness Show.
Rob, thanks for having me.